In my previous life, I performed a 10-hour surgery and only managed to buy a lemonade during a break. But a family member took a photo and falsely accused me of treating lives as a joke, leading to my suspension, a fine, and nationwide online abuse. When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the moment the family member posted the photo online. In front of everyone, I handed over the medical records and applied to withdraw from the treatment team. This time, let them fend for themselves. The lights were still on in the medical affairs office meeting room, and Director Chen was about to leave for the day when he saw me walk in with the medical records. His brow immediately furrowed. "Dr. Shaw, the patient just had surgery. Why are you down here?" I placed the medical records on the table. The heavy file landed with a dull thud. The surgery ended at 1842, and the patient was transferred to the ICU at 1858. Before the transfer, the nurse checked circulation, pupils were equal and round, and peripheral blood flow in the limbs was normal, I said, flipping open the anesthesia and surgery records along with the handover sheet. At 1903, I left the surgical area. At 1911, I was paying at the convenience store. The patient's family member took a photo and falsely claimed I left during the procedure. Director Chen was taken aback. Falsely claimed? I pushed my phone toward him. It's been less than 5 minutes since the post went up, and it's already been shared over 300 times. The account, Shaw Yao Wen, is a family and relationship blogger with more than 200,000 followers. His video titles are always exaggerated, things like, "The hospital's cold-blooded behavior after my mother-in-law was hospitalized made me break down," or, "How hard is it for ordinary people to see a doctor?" In the video, he's crying with red eyes. "My father-in-law had open chest surgery, and we still don't know if he'll live or die." Yet the lead surgeon was leisurely drinking a beverage outside. We're just an ordinary family. Doesn't an ordinary person's life matter? Someone in the comments had already dug up my name and photo. Dr. Shaw, Deputy Chief Physician of the Cardiothoracic Surgery Department at the First Affiliated Hospital of Wincore University. How can someone like this be a doctor? No wonder there are so many medical accidents. I suggest revoking their license directly. Familiar lines popped up one after another. In my past life, these comments eventually turned into millions of insults. Someone called my mother, telling her she raised a murderer. Someone poured paint on my doorstep. Someone even turned my photo into a funeral portrait and mailed it to my department. I once thought that as long as I saved the patient, everyone would understand. But after Mr. Joe died, they only became more frenzied in coming after me. Director Chen picked up his phone, his expression changing. "Don't panic for now, I'll notify the Public Relations Department immediately." I'm not in a hurry. I pulled out the already written application from the last page of the medical record. This is the application to withdraw from the treatment group. Director Chen suddenly looked up. "What did you say?" "The patient's family has publicly accused me of lacking a sense of responsibility and has lost basic trust in me. For me to continue serving as the attending physician does not meet the foundation for normal medical cooperation. Dr. Shaw, now is not the time to be stubborn. I'm not acting out of spite." I placed another document in front of him. This is the handover checklist, including the surgical procedure, intraoperative medications, cardiopulmonary bypass time, documentation volume, key points for postoperative monitoring, and possible complications. The patient's vital signs are currently stable, and other qualified doctors in the hospital can take over. I am applying to change the attending physician according to protocol. Director Chen stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You performed this surgery. Now that the family is making a scene and you're stepping back, what will people outside say?" What people outside say should not be a reason for me to continue bearing additional risks. The patient has only just entered the intensive care unit, so I completed the handover, not just leaving the patient and the ward. I flipped to the last page and pointed to one line. Intraoperatively, a residual tear was still visible at the distal end of the aorta. Over the next 48 hours, close monitoring of lower limb perfusion, lactate levels, and chest tube output is required. If necessary, repeat aortic CTA to assess the need for a secondary endovascular intervention. I wrote these same words in my previous life. But back then, after I was suspended, Dr. Chen said during the next day's case discussion that the patient's kidney function was poor and we could wait. The Zhou family didn't want to pay extra for the tests and accused me of deliberately scaring them. By the early morning of the third day, Mr. Zhou had ruptured, and by the time we tried to resuscitate him, it was too late. Director Chen rubbed his forehead. I can't decide this alone. Go back first, and don't provoke the family anymore. I didn't move. Please sign and acknowledge receipt of this application. Director Chen, please accept it. My tone was not loud, but it left no room for retreat. Just then, the door to the meeting room was pushed open, and Mr. Zhou Tao stormed in, slamming his hand on the table. What do you mean by this? Behind him followed Mrs. Xia Yawen, holding up her phone. My dad hasn't woken up yet, and you want to back out? Do you know something went wrong with the surgery and want to shift the blame early? I closed the medical record. Your father has already undergone the surgery and is currently receiving treatment in the ICU. Your public accusation that I abandoned my post during the operation shows that you no longer trust me. We just posted a photo, Mrs. Xia Yawen aimed her phone at me. If you haven't done anything wrong, why are you so afraid of us speaking out? You can post the photo. I looked into his camera, but the caption you wrote is fake. Which part of what I said is fake? Aren't you holding a glass of lemonade? Aren't you the surgeon who operated on my father-in-law? Isn't my father-in-law still in the ICU? Mrs. Xia Yawen immediately turned to his phone, his tone excited. Did everyone hear that? He admitted it himself. I didn't stop him. I also admit that the surgery ended 29 minutes ago and the patient has been handed over. I bought a drink after working continuously for 10 hours and 27 minutes. Mr. Xia Yawen's expression froze for a moment, then he sneered. Who knows if what you're saying is true or false? You and your hospital are all in cahoots. So I've already applied to seal the surveillance footage from the operating room and the convenience store. He instinctively lowered his phone. I looked at him. Don't delete the original video, and don't delete the post either. Are you threatening me? It's not a threat, it's a reminder. I turned to Director Chen. Please have the Medical Affairs Office arrange for the family to choose a new attending physician and complete the written informed consent. Mr. Zhou Tao gritted his teeth. Fine, we'll switch. Do you think our hospital only has you as a doctor? The sound of high heels echoed from outside the door. Dr. Chen Yu walked in wearing a white coat. He glanced at me first, then said gently to Mr. Zhou Tao, Mr. Zhou, don't rush. The patient is stable for now, and the treatment won't be affected by the change of doctor. Mrs. Xia Yawen clung to him like a lifeline. Dr. Chen, are you willing to take over? Dr. Chen Yu paused for 2 seconds. If the hospital arranges it, I'll do my best. His gaze fell on the medical records in my hand. A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It was the same in the previous life. He walked in when I was at my most vulnerable, and after I completed 90% of the treatment, he stood before the media claiming he had taken over in a critical moment, while I became the cold-hearted doctor who abandoned the patient. This time, I handed him the handover form. All right. From now on, Mr. Zhou is yours. Dr. Chen Yu took the medical records, and his smile finally couldn't be contained. I let go of my hand and reminded softly, page 2, clause 3, residual breach. Don't forget to check. His fingers tightened slightly. I turned and left the room. Behind me, Mrs. Shaw Yawen was still speaking into the camera. The hospital has decided to replace Dr. Shaw. This is a victory for ordinary people standing up for their rights. I didn't look back, because I knew the real cost was just beginning. At 7 a.m. the next morning, I showed up at the department morning meeting on time. Overnight, Mrs. Shaw Yawen's video had surpassed 2 million views, and several self-media outlets had already gathered at the hospital entrance. My name was ranked third on the local trending list. No one spoke in the meeting room. A few young doctors kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with me. Dr. Chen Yu sat next to the main seat, reporting on Mr. Zhou's condition overnight. The patient's blood pressure is currently maintained with a small dose of norepinephrine. Urine output is low, and lactate levels are slightly elevated. Considering the prolonged surgery time and the impact of cardiopulmonary bypass, let's continue monitoring for now. I flipped open the documents in front of me. How is the right dorsalis pedis artery? Dr. Chen Yu paused, weaker than the left side. When did it start weakening? Around 4 a.m. How much did the lactic acid level rise from noon to night? From 2.8 up to 4.1. I looked up. We need to do a bedside vascular ultrasound as soon as possible and evaluate the aortic CTA. Dr. Chen Yu frowned. The patient's creatinine has already increased. Performing a contrast-enhanced examination now may worsen the kidney injury. Kidney injury can be managed, but if distal perfusion impairment is delayed, the patient could lose a leg or even suffer an aortic rupture. He leaned back in his chair. Dr. Shaw, you've already withdrawn from the treatment team. I'm just completing the final confirmation of yesterday's handover. I handed the printed risk notice to Director Chen. From now on, all decisions will be made by the new treatment team. Director Su cleared his throat. Dr. Shaw, let's first talk about the public opinion matter. The publicity department drafted a statement overnight and hopes you'll cooperate. He slid a piece of paper in front of me. On it was written, I apologize for drinking a beverage in the workplace after a long surgery due to physical exhaustion, which led to misunderstandings among the patient's family members. I deeply regret the negative impact this has caused. I glanced at it twice. Why am I apologizing? Director Chen lowered his voice. It's not admitting to a medical error, just to calm public sentiment. The statement says I was drinking a beverage in the workplace. Isn't that the truth? The convenience store is not the operating room. The patient handover was already completed, and I was off duty when I bought the drink. I didn't violate any regulations. Dr. Shaw, the online sentiment is already intense. If you insist on arguing over every word, you'll only make things worse. So you want me to admit to something I never did? Is that what you call keeping the bigger picture in mind? I had heard those 4 words too many times in my past life: suspended for the hospital's greater good, apologizing for its reputation, returning bonuses to appease the family, enduring online harassment alone to avoid troubling my colleagues. But in the hospital's bigger picture, my innocence was never part of the frame. I picked up the pen. Director Chen's expression softened slightly. The next second, I flipped the statement over and wrote a single line on the back. I do not agree with the content of this statement and do not acknowledge any factual errors. I signed my name and date. Director Chen suddenly stood up. What kind of attitude is this? An attitude of cooperating with the procedure. I placed the paper back on the desk. The hospital can issue its own statement, but it cannot use my name to admit to problems that do not exist. Director Sue sighed. Dr. Shaw, everyone knows you've worked hard. But the patient's family is furious right now. You should take a step back first. I've already withdrawn from the treatment team. Where else do I need to step back to? The room fell silent. Director Chen tapped the table. Let's handle the treatment handover first. The Zhou family has requested Dr. Chen Yu to be the attending physician, and we respect the family's opinion. I nodded. Then please have the family sign the confirmation form for changing the attending physician. Dr. Chen Yu looked at me. Is this necessary? It's just a normal group change. Yes. I placed the prepared documents on the table. First, the family explicitly stated they do not trust the original attending physician. Second, the family proactively requested a change of doctor. Third, the new treatment team has received all medical records and risk warnings. Fourth, from the time of signing, all subsequent treatment decisions are the responsibility of the new treatment team. Dr. Chen Yu's expression shifted slightly. Are you trying to draw a clear line of responsibility? The handover is meant to draw a clear line of responsibility in the first place. Is it really necessary for doctors to be so precise with each other? Yes. I looked at him. Especially when someone is taking the medical records while preparing to leave the consequences to me. Dr. Chen Yu's lips stiffened. Director Su immediately smoothed things over. Don't say words. Just sign according to the procedure. At 9 a.m. Mr. Zhou Tao and Mrs. Shaw Yaowen were called into the consultation room. Mrs. Shaw Yaowen was still live streaming. He swept the camera across the table and deliberately said, "The hospital has finally agreed to change our doctor. See, this is what persistence in fighting for our rights means." I didn't stop him. Director Chen explained the consequences of the doctor change. Dr. Shaw will no longer be involved in Mr. Zhou's daily treatment and subsequent decision-making. Dr. Chen Yu and his team will take over completely. Mr. Zhou Tao picked up the pen and signed his name without hesitation. Mrs. Shaw Yaowen also signed in the witness column. I handed over the second risk notification. The patient currently has insufficient perfusion in the right lower limb and elevated lactate levels. It is recommended to conduct a vascular assessment as soon as possible. If necessary, repeat the aortic CTA. Wasn't the surgery said to be successful yesterday? Completing the surgery doesn't mean there are no subsequent risks. Acute aortic dissection itself has a very high mortality rate. Are you trying to get us to do tests and pay again? Is this medical advice? We just paid over 100,000, and now more tests. Are you deliberately trying to scare us because we exposed you? I looked at him. You can refuse. He didn't expect me to answer like that. But please sign in the refusal to examine column. Mrs. Shaw Yaowen immediately pushed the paper away. I won't sign. Why should we take the responsibility? Because the decision was made by you. Dr. Chen didn't even say it was absolutely necessary. All eyes turned to Dr. Chen Yu. He pressed his lips together and said, "My opinion is that we can observe for 6 hours first and decide after the kidney function results come out." Mr. Zhou Tao immediately said, "Did you hear that? We'll follow Dr. Chen's advice." I nodded. Please record Dr. Chen's opinion and the family's choice in the medical records. Dr. Chen Yu frowned. There's no need for you to keep emphasizing that it's necessary. I closed my folder. From now on, I will no longer offer personal opinions on Mr. Zhou's treatment. since you've chosen to trust Dr. Chen Yu, then see that trust through to the end. As I walked out of the consultation room, Nurse Tang hurried over from the ICU, lowering her voice. Dr. Shaw, Mr. Zhou's right leg temperature is dropping, and his blood pressure is unstable. I paused mid-step. In my past life, this change didn't become apparent until the afternoon, but this time it had arrived a full 6 hours early. I turned to look at the monitor behind the glass door, the red numbers slowly falling. Yet behind me, Dr. Chen Yu was saying to Mrs. Shaw Yaowen, "Don't worry, post-operative fluctuations are common." I tightened my grip on the folder. This time, I had already given my warning and kept all the records. The rest of the path was theirs to choose. At noon, the hospital officially notified me to suspend my outpatient consultations and surgeries, citing the need to cooperate with the public opinion investigation. The notice did not use the words suspension or punishment, but everyone knew exactly what it meant. My name was removed from the next day's surgery schedule, and the 2 surgeries originally assigned to me were transferred to Dr. Chen Yu. Nurse Tang passed by the nurses' station, holding a freshly printed schedule in her hand. "The hospital leadership is trying to protect you, you might as well take a few days off." I looked up at her. "Yesterday regarding that surgery, when did you find out that the Shaw family was planning to release the video?" She stopped in her tracks. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You were at the other end of the hallway when Mrs. Shaw Yaowen took the photos." "There were so many people in the hospital hallway, I didn't notice." Before he posted the video, he sent a message to someone saved as Dr. Chen. Nurse Tang's pupils constricted. "You snooped through a patient's family member's phone." During his live stream, a chat reminder appeared on his screen. In fact, I only learned about that message much later in my past life, when Mrs. Shaw Yaowen was investigated for fundraising issues and the police recovered his chat records. "Post photos to scam money," he asked Dr. Chen Yu. "Is Dr. Shaw still the lead surgeon now? If I post a video of him drinking a beverage, will people accuse me of spreading rumors?" Dr. Chen Yu replied, "The patient hasn't left the ICU, so the lead surgeon still has ongoing management responsibility. You're just stating what you saw." That statement didn't directly tell him to spread rumors, but it gave him enough of a hint. Dr. Chen Yu quickly regained his composure. "You're in a bad mood right now, don't jump to conclusions. Whether it's a guess or not, we'll find out after the investigation." I packed up my personal belongings from the desk. Seeing me take my badge and the seal from the drawer, he couldn't help asking, "Are you really planning to leave?" "Just taking a vacation." "That's good," he said, but disappointment was clearly flashing in his eyes. He wanted me to leave, preferably, never to return. In the afternoon, Attorney Wang arrived at the cafe near the hospital. He was my college roommate and later switched careers to become a lawyer. In my previous life, when the hospital terminated my contract, I had sought him out, but by then the most crucial surveillance footage had been overwritten, the original post had been deleted, and the hospital was only willing to give me a vague investigation conclusion, refusing to admit the disciplinary error. After reading through the materials I had saved, he looked up. "You reacted quickly this time, faster." He opened the computer. "First, let's create electronic evidence. The original post's homepage, follower count, number of shares, comments, and live stream replays. Not a single one can be missed." "What about the hospital surveillance footage? Did you send an email requesting it to be sealed?" "Sent, with CC to the disciplinary committee and legal counsel." Attorney Wang smiled slightly. "You finally learned not to leave room for others to maneuver." I held my cup without answering. He didn't know it took me a life to learn that lesson. At 3 p.m. Mrs. Shaw Yawan went live again with the title, "After exposing the unscrupulous doctor, I was threatened by the hospital." Sitting outside the ICU, he sobbed, his shoulders trembling. "Not only refuses to apologize, but because we told the truth, he has stopped treating my father-in-law. He made us sign a bunch of waivers just to shift the blame onto the family." Ordinary people are truly helpless against a big hospital. The number of viewers in the live stream quickly exceeded 50,000. Someone asked about the patient's condition, and Mrs. Shaw Yawan wiped his tears. "He hasn't woken up yet. The hospital says the surgery was successful, but he might just lie there forever. Who knows what's really going on?" I opened the screen recording, and Attorney Wong warned me, "Don't respond in the live stream." I know. Also, don't issue any emotional statements. I won't. In my past life, I once wrote a 3,000-word explanation in the early hours, detailing the surgical procedure and explaining why doctors need to drink, eat, and rest. But those who didn't want to hear the complex medical process only clipped one sentence. I did leave after the patient entered the ICU, and then titled it, "Negligent Doctor Admits to Leaving Post." This time, I won't hand over the right to explain to the editors. I'll only preserve the facts. At 4 o'clock, Dr. Lin Lon issued a written statement. "As the person in charge of Mr. Joe's surgical anesthesia, I confirmed that Dr. Shaw was present in the operating room from 8:15 a.m. until the surgery ended at 6:42 p.m. participating in the main procedures throughout and did not leave the surgical area during the operation." Nurse Tang also made a copy of the intensive care handover record, which clearly stated, "At 6:58 p.m. the patient was transferred to the intensive care unit by Dr. Shaw and the surgical nurses. Bedside handover was completed at 7:05 p.m. The convenience store payment record shows a time stamp of 7:11 and 17 seconds p.m. I lined up the three timelines with no room for ambiguity. In the evening, the hospital's public relations department issued a brief notice. The hospital takes the online reactions very seriously. It has suspended the relevant doctor from clinical duties, and the incident is under investigation. No explanation was given about when the surgery ended or when the photos were taken, only that the relevant doctor's medical practice has been suspended. This statement essentially implies to the public that I am indeed at fault. 10 minutes after the notice was issued, Mrs. Shaw Yawan excitedly said to the live stream camera, "Did you all see that? The hospital has suspended Dr. Shaw. He wasn't wrong. Why would the hospital suspend him?" I stared at the notice and called Director Chen. "Is this how the hospital handles things?" Director Chen's tone was weary. "It's just a temporary measure. It doesn't mean you're wrong. The public won't understand it that way. Let's suppress public opinion first and wait until the investigation results come out before saying anything." Why not release the timeline? The family members are emotionally agitated right now. Releasing the details might provoke them. I let out a laugh, so it's fine to provoke me. There was silence on the other end of the line. I hung up and handed the hospital report to Attorney Wong for safekeeping. At 7 p.m. Nurse Tang suddenly sent me a photo. It was Mr. Joe's latest bedside ultrasound result, significantly reduced blood flow in the right femoral artery. Below it was a sentence, "Dr. Chen decided to continue monitoring. The family refuses to do a CTA." I stared at the line of text, my palms growing cold bit by bit. The trajectory of my past life was repeating itself. But this time, I wasn't in the treatment group, and I didn't need to rush into the ward to forcefully persuade anyone while enduring the insults of their family members. I only replied to Nurse Tang, "Follow the procedure and document it. Protect yourself." No sooner had the message been sent than Mrs. Xia Yaowen's live stream popped up again. He announced to tens of thousands of viewers, "The hospital has already replaced Dr. Xia, proving that he is the problem." Behind him, the door to the intensive care unit suddenly opened, and a nurse rushed out, "Family of Mr. Zhou, the patient's blood pressure is dropping. Please come to the consultation room immediately." The live broadcast camera shook violently, and the next second, the screen went completely black. After Mr. Zhou's blood pressure dropped, the intensive care team immediately performed fluid adjustment, active drug administration, and bedside examinations. At 8:30 p.m. the department held an emergency consultation. I was not part of the treatment team and had already been suspended from clinical work, yet I still received the meeting notice, the reason being that I was the primary surgeon for the first operation and needed to explain the intraoperative situation. The atmosphere in the meeting room was oppressive. Mr. Zhou's imaging was displayed on the screen. Dr. Chen Yu stood at the front. "Currently, we suspect postoperative low cardiac output and insufficient peripheral perfusion. The chest tube drainage volume has not significantly increased, so active bleeding is not supported for now." I looked at the latest indicators. Lactate had risen to 6.3, the skin temperature of the right foot had dropped, and the dorsalis pedis artery was almost undetectable. The likelihood of distal dissection progression is very high. Dr. Chen Yu turned his head. "Without a CTA, we can't be certain. So we should do it as soon as possible." He frowned. "The patient's creatinine is 196, and continuing to use contrast agents carry significant risk. Risks need to be compared. The risks of lower limb ischemia and aortic rupture are even greater." Director Su asked, "Where exactly did you see the residual tear during the surgery?" I pulled up the intraoperative record. After blood flow and the distal aorta were restored, perfusion in the right lower limb improved temporarily, but the pressure in the distal true and false lumens remained unstable. "Do you think a second surgery is necessary?" "At the very least, we need to conduct imaging assessment first. If progressive perfusion impairment occurs, endovascular repair should be performed as soon as possible, and open surgery, if necessary." Dr. Chen Yu immediately said, "The patient has just undergone a major 10-hour surgery. Performing another one would carry an extremely high risk of death." I looked at him. "Assessment, not an immediate decision. The family is very sensitive right now, saying that will only make them think the first surgery failed. Medical judgment isn't about saving anyone's face." The meeting room fell silent for a moment. Director Su tapped the table. "Call the family in and communicate thoroughly." When Mr. Zhou Tao and Mrs. Xia Yaowen entered, Mrs. Xia Yaowen did not start a live stream but placed her phone on the outside of her bag with the camera facing the table. I noticed it but didn't call her out. Dr. Chen Yu first explained the patient's current condition, speaking tactfully. "There have been some fluctuations in the postoperative indicators. We recommend closer observation, and further imaging tests could also be considered." Mr. Zhou Tao immediately asked, "How much does the test cost?" "Probably a few thousand." "Will there be another surgery after this?" "It depends on the results." Mrs. Xia Yaowen looked at me. "Dr. Xia, didn't you say yesterday that the surgery was very successful? Why do we need to run tests now?" "I said the surgery was completed as planned, but I never said the patient was out of danger." "You deliberately made it sound nice to trick us into signing." The preoperative discussion clearly states that after acute aortic dissection surgery, complications such as bleeding, organ ischemia, renal failure, and secondary surgery may occur. Mr. Zhou Tao slammed the table. Who can understand all that jargon you use? I explained each item one by one, and the conversation recording is also available. His expression immediately turned unpleasant. Mrs. Shaw Yawen quickly changed the subject. You're no longer the attending physician now, so why are you still here scaring us? Because the hospital requires me to explain the intraoperative situation. I pushed the risk disclosure form over. My suggestion is to get the examination done as soon as possible. He looked at Dr. Chen Yu. Dr. Chen, does it have to be done immediately? Dr. Chen Yu hesitated for a moment. We can observe for a few more hours. Then we won't do it, Mr. Zhou Tao said quickly. My dad's kidneys are already in bad shape. Wouldn't giving him contrast agent just make things worse? I nodded. You can refuse. Please sign here. Mr. Zhou Tao took the document, glanced at it, added a few lines, and tore it in half, letting the paper fall to the floor, trying to get us to sign a waiver again. What else can you doctors do besides making family members sign papers? I bent down to pick up the torn pieces one by one, then handed them to Nurse Tang. Seal them in the medical record. Note the time, location, and everyone present. Mr. Zhou Tao pointed at me. What do you mean by that? The hospital has already informed you of the risks. I don't acknowledge the surveillance. He instinctively glanced at the corner of the room. The consultation room had clear signage indicating that all doctor-patient communication processes would be audio and video recorded. Mrs. Shaw Yawen stood up. Let's go. Anyway, Dr. Chen is in charge now, so we'll listen to him. The door slammed shut heavily. Director Su asked in a low voice, Dr. Chen, are you sure we should continue observation? Dr. Chen Yu's expression was not good. Let's do bedside ultrasound and invasive monitoring first. If the indicators continue to deteriorate, then we'll talk about CTA. I didn't continue the argument. I had already withdrawn from the treatment group, and all my suggestions had been recorded in the official documentation. I stood up. May I leave now? Director Su sighed. Dr. Shaw, don't let emotions get the better of you. We're all here for the patients. I'm not emotional. Then why do you have to write every sentence so clearly? I looked at him, because responsibility always ends up falling on the shoulders of those most willing to take it. After leaving the conference room, I changed out of my white coat in the locker room. The hospital had given me 7 days of administrative leave. My phone kept buzzing with unfamiliar numbers and abusive messages. Murderer doctor, playing with people's lives, you'll get what's coming to you, how can you still have the face to live? I turned on unknown number blocking, backed up all the information, and handed it over to Attorney Wang. It was already dark when I walked out of the hospital. My mother called me. I saw your name online. Did something happen? In my past life, I was afraid she would worry, so I lied and said it was just a misunderstanding. She later received dozens of abusive calls at home alone and collapsed in the living room from a stroke. This time, I didn't hide the truth. Someone is spreading rumors. I've saved the evidence and found a lawyer. Does the hospital believe you? I paused for a few seconds. I'll make them believe the evidence. My mother was silent for a moment, then said, Go home first, dinner is ready. Hearing this, my nose suddenly tingled. In the final days of my past life, I was always in late-night meetings and under investigation, always saying I would go back to be with her once things were over, but she never got to wait that long. This time, I came home on time. At 10:40 p.m. Nurse Tang called, "Dr. Shaw, the patient's chest drainage volume has suddenly increased, and blood pressure is undetectable. We're preparing for an emergency CTA." I sat up straight. Did the family agree? They refused just now. Dr. Chen said a second surgery might be needed, and now they're arguing. Rapid footsteps came from the other end of the line, and a few seconds later Nurse Tang lowered her voice. "The patient's consciousness is starting to deteriorate." I gripped my phone tightly. In my past life, it was from this moment that everyone came to me, begged me to come back, pressured me to return, ordered me to set aside my grievances. But when the patient died, they said I hadn't tried hard enough. This time, I only said, "Follow the emergency protocol, notify the attending physician on duty and arrange an in-hospital consultation." Nurse Tang paused. "Aren't you coming over?" "I'm no longer in the treatment group, and I'm also on a break from clinical work." "But Dr. Shaw," I interrupted her, "protect your patients, and protect yourself too." After hanging up, I sat at the dining table for a long time without moving. My mother came out of her room and placed a glass of water beside me. "Does it hurt a lot?" "Yeah." "Then let yourself feel bad for a while," she patted my shoulder. "But don't carry other people's mistakes on your own shoulders." I looked down at the glass of water. At 1 a.m. an urgent notice was sent out in the hospital group chat. Mr. Joe's distal aortic tear had expanded, and his right iliac artery was nearly completely occluded, requiring immediate secondary intervention. After a full 10 minutes of silence in the group, Dr. Chen Yu finally posted a message, requesting Dr. Shaw to return for a consultation. At 1:28 a.m. Director Chen called me. "Dr. Shaw, the patient's condition is critical." I saw the group message. "The hospital hopes you can come back immediately." "In what capacity?" There was a pause on the other end. "As a consulting expert. I am currently in a state of suspended medical treatment." "This is a special situation." "Who issued the suspension decision?" "The hospital." "Then please have the hospital formally withdraw it in writing." Director Chen's tone grew urgent. "Every minute now is a matter of life and death for the patient. The paperwork can be completed later." The words from my past life almost rushed to my lips, but I swallowed them back. They had said the same thing: save the person first, handle the paperwork later, perform the surgery first, discuss responsibility afterward. But when the patient died on the table, all the missing paperwork became my fault. I replied calmly, "Without formal authorization, I will not enter the operating room." "You're a doctor, you know better than anyone what a high-risk surgery requires. You're gambling with the patient's life and the hospital's reputation." Director Chen, yesterday afternoon the hospital suspended my clinical privileges. Last night, the family signed to change the attending physician. Just now, the new treatment team decided to delay the examination. Now the patient has deteriorated, and you're asking me to come back and perform the surgery, without privileges, without trust, and without a complete preoperative assessment. I asked word by word, "Who exactly is gambling with the patient's life?" Only the sound of rapid breathing remained on the other end of the line. A few minutes later, Director Su called personally. "Dr. Shaw, the hospital can immediately restore your temporary medical privileges. Send me the written document." "All right." The family must remove all defamatory content, issue a written clarification, and sign a new informed consent form for my continued involvement in the treatment. Director Su paused for a moment. "Can we discuss this after you come back first?" "No." The family is very emotional. That means the trust has yet to be restored. Human lives are at stake. Precisely because human lives are at stake, I cannot perform a high-mortality secondary surgery in front of a family that secretly records videos, takes things out of context, refuses examinations, and refuses to accept the consequences of their choices. Director Sue sighed, I'll go talk to them. At 1:40 a.m. The hospital sent the document temporarily restoring my medical privileges to my email. At 1:45 a.m. Mr. Joe Tao called and immediately shouted, Dr. Shaw, are you coming back or not? If anything happens to my father, I won't let you off. I directly started recording, Mr. Joe, please watch your language. What kind of time is this for you to be splitting hairs with me? Did the hospital inform you that my involvement in the diagnosis and treatment would need to be resumed? They did. Are you willing to take down the false video and issue a clarification of the facts? The line went silent for a few seconds. Mrs. Shaw Yawen's voice came through, why should we? Everything we said was based on what we saw with our own eyes. Deleting the video now would be like admitting we were spreading rumors. I asked, since you think I lack a sense of responsibility, why are you asking me to come back and perform the surgery? Because the hospital said you're the most familiar with the case. That doesn't mean I have to take over again while being continuously slandered. Mr. Joe Tao roared, aren't you afraid of facing retribution? I have completed the surgical handover and risk reminders. You refused the examination and chose to change doctors. Now I just need you to take responsibility for what you said publicly. Mrs. Shaw Yawen snatched the phone, you're taking advantage of the situation, are you trying to force us to back down? It's not about backing down, but restoring the most basic trust in medical care. We won't delete it, come or not, it's up to you. The world is so big, it's impossible that only you can perform surgery. Fine. I ended the recording. At exactly 2 a.m. the Joe family decided to transfer hospitals. They contacted a private cardiac hospital that had excellent marketing, international team, and high-end service, plastered all over the internet, but in reality it lacked the capability for complex secondary open aortic surgery. The ambulance stopped at the entrance of the ICU, and the doctor once again explained the risks of transfer to the family. Mr. Joe Tao insisted on signing, none of the doctors here are trustworthy, my dad is in more danger staying here. Dr. Chen Yu stood nearby, his face pale, he no longer claimed he could handle it, yet he still refused to admit his earlier judgment had been wrong. At 2:20 a.m. the ambulance drove out of the hospital. I sat at home, listening to the recording sent by Attorney Wong. He said, now there's enough evidence to prove that you didn't refuse treatment, it was the family members who refused to cooperate and voluntarily transferred the patient under reasonable conditions for rebuilding trust. Are you worried about the patient? Do you regret not going back? I looked out the window, I'm not a god. Just because I'm worried doesn't mean I should allow them to tear up the rules time and time again. Before the words had even faded, a message suddenly popped up in the hospital group chat, the patient is experiencing circulatory failure during transport, and the ambulance is requesting to return to our emergency department. Director Sue called, the patient is about to arrive at the emergency room. Can you come and assist with the rescue first? This time, I did not refuse. In an emergency, any doctor has the duty to provide treatment. However, I made it clear in advance, I will only participate in the emergency rescue and condition assessment. Whether I rejoin the follow-up treatment after the patient stabilizes will be decided separately. Please record the entire process with audio and video. Okay. When I rushed to the emergency room, the ambulance had just burst through the entrance. As the rear door opened, Mr. Joe Tao's face was pale. "Dr. Shaw, please save my dad." I didn't look at him. I directly put on my hat and mask, took the emergency record, blood pressure unmeasurable, femoral pulse absent, immediately performed endotracheal intubation, initiated massive transfusion protocol, and notified the interventional, anesthesia, and extracorporeal circulation teams. I ran alongside the stretcher. Mrs. Shaw Yawan was still holding his phone in his hand. I shouted sternly, "Put the phone down." He flinched in fright. "Filming is prohibited in the resuscitation area. Security, escort the family member out." The emergency room door closed in front of him. I stood by the resuscitation bed, watching the nearly flat blood pressure curve on the monitor. At this moment, I would still save him, not for show, not for the hospital, and certainly not to prove how great I am, only because the person lying on the bed was unconscious. But once the emergency treatment is over, who lied, who refused the examination, who traded the patient's life for traffic, I will settle every single account. Resuscitation lasted 40 minutes, fluid replacement, blood transfusion, vasopressors, bedside ultrasound. Mr. Joe's blood pressure finally returned from undetectable to 78 millimeters of mercury. Though still unstable, he was at least temporarily out of immediate danger of death. The team's assessment: the patient's distal aortic true lumen was severely compressed, with insufficient perfusion to the right lower limb and mesenteric artery. If delayed any further, multiple organ failure could occur at any time. Director Sue asked me, "What do you think we should do next?" "First, use an endovascular stent to restore distal blood flow, buying time for subsequent treatment. A second open surgery right now would be too much for the patient to endure." "Can you participate in the intervention?" "I can provide preoperative advice, but the interventional department will take the lead." Director Sue looked at me for a few seconds. "What about the follow-up treatment?" "We'll discuss it after the family completes the new communication." He seemed about to say something, but eventually just nodded. 2 hours later, the stent was successfully deployed, blood flow to the patient's right lower limb was restored, and lactate levels began to slowly decrease. By the time I took off my lead apron and walked out of the interventional center, dawn had already broken. Mr. Joe Tao came up to me. "How's my dad?" "Stable for now." "Then you'll still be in charge from now on." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if he hadn't been the one threatening me just a few hours ago. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. I only participated in the emergency rescue and technical consultation. "You saved him, so why can't you continue?" "Because you haven't taken down the false rumors or restored basic trust." Mrs. Shaw Yawan immediately raised his phone. "Look, everyone, after saving my father-in-law, he's now using this to threaten us." I only then realized he was live streaming. In the camera, I was wearing a blood-stained surgical gown, my face pale. The live chat comments were scrolling rapidly. Wasn't he suspended? How is he doing rescue again? Did the hospital find out he's not at fault? The family says he threatened people. Is that true or false? I looked into the camera without flinching. Emergency rescue. Regardless of whether the patient's family spreads rumors, medical staff will never refuse on-site emergency care. Mrs. Shaw Yawan quickly interjected, "So you do understand that human life is the most important. In that case, why can't you continue to take responsibility? The duty of emergency care does not equate to having to provide subsequent elective treatment in an environment where trust is lost and where there is constant secret filming and room maneuvering. You're just holding a grudge against us." I demand that you take responsibility for the false information you have publicly released. Where exactly is it false? Surgery ended at 1842, the patient was transferred to the ICU at 1858, and the convenience store payment was made at 1911. Mrs. Shaw Yawan immediately turned the phone toward himself. All of this is data provided unilaterally by the hospital. Who knows if it's been tampered with? I nodded. So I've already applied to obtain third-party payment records, convenience store surveillance footage, and the hospital system logs. His expression changed. Also, please stop filming other patients and medical staff in the healthcare area. I turned and walked away, while he continued shouting behind me, he doesn't dare to answer. I did not stop. Half an hour later, Attorney Wang sent the formal lawyer's letter to Mrs. Shaw Yawan, demanding that he delete the false content within 24 hours, cease the infringement, issue a public clarification, and retain all original data. Otherwise, they would file a defamation lawsuit and apply for a restraining order. Mrs. Shaw Yawan filmed a video of the lawyer's letter. A corrupt doctor is threatening a patient with legal action, he cried, claiming that he had already lost everything to pay for his father-in-law's medical treatment and now the doctor was suing him. Below the video, a fundraising link was posted with the title, 62-year-old father's surgery failed, urgently needs life-saving operation. Nurse Tang immediately came to me after seeing it, surgery failed. The patient's first surgery clearly achieved the expected outcome. He needs a tragic enough story to raise money. But the hospital bill only amounts to over 100,000, yet the fundraising goal is set at 1.5 million. I clicked on the link, the page showed over 6,000 donations, raising 870,000 yuan. In the fundraising description, Mrs. Shaw Yawan wrote, the lead surgeon left his post during the operation without authorization, causing the elderly patient's condition to deteriorate. Now the hospital refuses to take responsibility. Every word was amplifying the infringement. After reading it, Attorney Wang immediately applied to preserve evidence of the fundraising page and contacted the platform to freeze the flow of funds. In the afternoon, the hospital informed me to participate in an internal investigation. The investigation team asked many questions. Why didn't you return to the office immediately after the surgery? I went to buy a drink. Why are you going to the convenience store wearing surgical scrubs? An isolation gown that meets infection control requirements is worn over them, and the area entered is a clean zone. Can the primary surgeon leave while the patient is in the intensive care unit? They can leave after completing the handover. The intensive care unit has dedicated doctors and nurses. Did you refuse to continue treatment because of the family member's online post? No. I placed the withdrawal application and handover documents on the table. The family publicly expressed distrust and actively requested a change of doctor, and the hospital agreed to the change. I completed the handover in accordance with laws and regulations. Director Chen sat across from me, his expression grim, but the timing of your withdrawal is too sensitive, the public can easily think you're acting out of spite. The public's misunderstanding cannot change the facts. Have you considered the hospital's reputation? When the hospital issued a vague notice and suspended me from work, did it consider my reputation? The investigation room fell silent. I continued, now that the family is raising funds based on false information and the hospital still refuses to release the complete timeline, tell me, is the hospital protecting patient privacy, or is it waiting for me to bear all the consequences? No one answered. At the end of the meeting, Director Chen hurried out after me. The hospital is preparing to negotiate with the Shaw family to have them delete the video. Can you hold off on filing the lawsuit for now? Why? Making a big deal out of this won't do the hospital any good. It's already blown up. If they're willing to apologize, an apology can't replace responsibility. Director Chen sighed, "You weren't this aggressive before." I stopped in my tracks. The old me thought that if I just endured it, things would pass. Later, I realized things do pass, but the people who were sacrificed may not. In the evening, I checked the initial transaction records of the fundraising account. 870,000 yuan in donations had not entered the hospital account. Among them, 200,000 yuan was transferred to Mrs. Xia Yaowen's personal bank card, 90,000 yuan was used to repay online loans, and another 120,000 yuan was transferred to a company called Xia Horizon Media, with a note reading, "Permission fee." Attorney Wang zoomed in on the screenshot of the transaction records. He used his father-in-law's illness for permission and even bought trending exposure. I stared at the screen. In my previous life, I knew nothing about this until the very end. So the public opinion that had driven me into the abyss was never just the uncontrolled outburst of a desperate family member, it was a business, and I was the material he had chosen. On the third day after the independent investigation was launched, Dr. Chen Yu voluntarily submitted a statement. In it, he wrote, "When Dr. Xia withdrew from the treatment team, only a verbal handover was conducted without fully explaining the severity of the distal residual breach, leading to the new team's insufficient assessment of the patient's risk." This document was quickly passed to the hospital leadership. Director Su called me into his office. "Dr. Chen said that during the handover, you did not emphasize the need for an immediate CTA." I did not argue, I only opened my computer. On the second page, third item of the handover form, the screen clearly showed, intraoperatively, a residual distal aortic tear was observed. Postoperatively, close monitoring of bilateral lower limb perfusion, lactate levels, and signs of mesenteric ischemia is required. If abnormalities are detected, immediate aortic CTA is recommended to assess the need for endovascular or open secondary intervention. Below was my electronic signature, as well as Dr. Chen Yu's acknowledgement signature, time-stamped at 1936 the previous day. Director Su's expression changed, he signed it. Yes. I continued to open the hospital's internal communication system. At 1942, I had sent the same risk alert to the treatment group's work platform, and Dr. Chen Yu replied, "Received." Director Su was silent for a long time. You might not have realized how high the risk was. He is a deputy chief physician in cardiac surgery. Lack of technical skill can be learned from, and misjudgment can be reviewed. But claiming not to have received the handover in order to evade responsibility is another matter entirely. The hospital subsequently retrieved the complete system logs. The IT department found that at 3 a.m. on the day the patient deteriorated, Dr. Chen Yu had modified the consultation opinion. The original content read, "Dr. Shou recommends immediate CTA. Considering the patient's renal insufficiency, postpone for now." After modification, it became, the original treatment group did not clearly indicate urgent indications. Observation for now. He thought the system only kept the final version, unaware that the IT department had a complete log of all revisions in the background. More critical evidence came from Nurse Tang. Every day during shift handovers, Nurse Tang recorded important doctor-patient communications in the nursing management system. 10:15 a.m. On the first day after surgery, Dr. Shaw informed the family that the patient's right foot skin temperature had dropped and blood flow had decreased, recommending further examinations. Family member Mr. Zhou Tao refused due to high costs. Family member Mrs. Xia Yaowen claimed Dr. Shaw did it on purpose. Refused to sign the notification form and left the communication room. 4:50 p.m. The patient's lactate levels continued to rise. The family was notified again. Dr. Chen Yu recommended continued observation, and the family agreed. Each entry includes a time stamp, personnel, and system signature. Dr. Chen Yu's attempt to construct an incomplete handover collapsed on the spot. At the internal investigation meeting, he sat across from me, his fingers tightly gripping a pen. The head of the investigation asked, "Dr. Chen, why did you state in your written explanation that you did not receive a clear risk warning?" "There was too much information at the time, and I might have overlooked it." "You have already signed and replied with 'received.' I thought it was just a routine reminder." "Why are you revising the consultation record?" "I'm just standardizing the wording." "Is deleting Dr. Shaw has made an urgent recommendation also considered standardizing the wording?" Dr. Chen Yu's face turned pale. "I didn't delete it, I just reorganized it based on the situation at the time. I placed the last piece of material on the table. There's also a chat log here." He suddenly looked at me. It was a screenshot of a chat that Mrs. Shaw Yawen accidentally exposed during a live stream, recovered frame by frame from the public footage by Attorney Wang and submitted to the platform for preservation. The chat contact was labeled Dr. Chen. "Mrs. Shaw Yawen, after Dr. Shaw is suspended, who gets credit for the surgery?" "Dr. Chen Yu, I will take over the follow-up treatment, so naturally I am responsible for the medical record summary." "Mrs. Shaw Yawen, if I say a few more words about him, wouldn't that also benefit you?" Dr. Chen Yu, without directly answering, "The family has the right to express their true feelings." A few minutes later, he added, "Once he is suspended, the selection of the head of the aortic center will be reconsidered." The head of the investigation team looked up. "Dr. Chen, please explain." Dr. Chen Yu's lips moved several times. "This was just a private conversation. I was comforting the family." "You disclosed information about internal job competition to the patient's family, and that was also comforting." "I did not induce him to spread rumors." "I finally spoke. You never directly told him to spread rumors, but you knew the surgery was already over, yet you still told him that the lead surgeon has an ongoing responsibility for critically ill patients. You knew he was live streaming, yet you didn't correct his claim about drinking beverages mid-surgery. You knew the patient needed an immediate examination, yet you went along with the family's decision to keep observing, just to prove that your judgment was milder than mine." Dr. Chen Yu suddenly looked up. "Don't put all the blame on me, you performed the first surgery. Are you saying you bear no responsibility for the patient's complications?" "Complications are not the same as medical negligence. I have never shied away from the medical responsibility of the first surgery, the surgical records, risk assessment, procedure selection, operation process, and residual risks. I am fully prepared for professional review. But what you're facing now is not a surgical complication, it's why you concealed the handover you had already received, why you deleted the records, and why you turned the patient family's rumors into an opportunity to compete for a position." Dr. Chen Yu's eyes reddened. "You just want to destroy me." "It wasn't me," I looked at him. "You snatched the medical records just to take the credit, now it's time for you to take on the responsibility that belongs to you." After the investigation meeting, Dr. Chen Yu was suspended from his position as the attending physician. As he walked out of the room, Mrs. Shaw Yawen was standing in the hallway holding up his phone. The two of them stared at each other from a dozen meters apart. There was not a trace of gratitude on Mrs. Shaw Yawen's face. He rushed over and demanded, "Didn't you say you could take over? Didn't you say she wasn't that important?" Dr. Chen Yu lowered his voice. "You were the ones who refused the examination, you told us to observe first." "I only said observation was possible, not that you should transfer to another hospital. Their argument grew louder, and many people around them stopped in their tracks. I walked past them. Mrs. Shaw Yawan suddenly stopped me. Dr. Shaw, are you satisfied now? My dad is still lying in there, and all you know how to do is shift the blame onto each other. I looked at him. It was you who refused, you who demanded a change of doctors, you who insisted on transferring hospitals. Why is it that every time you make the choices, someone else has to bear the consequences? He opened his mouth to speak. I walked around him and continued forward. From behind, Dr. Chen Yu's voice rang out uncontrollably. Don't play innocent, that first video was clearly designed by you yourself. The corridor fell silent instantly. Mrs. Shaw Yawen's face changed drastically, and Dr. Chen Yu realized he had let something slip, but it was too late. A nearby journalist's camera was showing a red light. Dr. Chen Yu's remark made it to the trending list that very evening. For the first time, public opinion began to shift. Some people started asking, if the patient had already undergone surgery, why couldn't the doctor drink water? Why hasn't the hospital disclosed the time the surgery ended? Did the family deliberately blur the timeline? But the hospital still did not release complete evidence. The next day, the dean's secretary informed me to go to the office. In the dean's office sat Director Su, Director Chen, and the hospital's legal counsel. A settlement agreement lay on the table. The dean spoke up himself. The hospital has preliminarily determined that you did not leave your post during the surgery. The preliminary report still needs to go through the proper procedures. When will it be made public? Public sentiment is cooling down. Disclosing too many details may not be a good thing. I said nothing. The director pushed the agreement in front of me. The hospital can immediately reinstate your outpatient and surgical privileges, revoke the suspension decision, and issue back pay for performance bonuses. Additionally, you will still be given priority consideration for the position of head of the aortic center. What are the conditions? You withdraw your accountability claims against the relevant hospital personnel and cease disclosing internal communication materials to the public. As for the lawsuit filed by the patient's family, the hospital will not interfere. I turned to the last page. Sure enough, there was a confidentiality clause. Neither party shall, in any form, to the media, online platforms, or any third party, disclose the hospital's internal documents, meeting content, or personnel handling related to this incident. I picked up my pen. The director's expression relaxed slightly. But I crossed out the entire confidentiality clause and wrote beside it, the hospital must publicly confirm that I was not without leave during surgery, did not delay treatment, and did not refuse emergency care, and must retract any previous notices that may have caused misunderstanding. Director Chen immediately said, that's not realistic. Publicly admitting that the previous notification had issues would trigger new public backlash. The previous notification made the public mistakenly believe that I was at fault. We didn't explicitly say you were at fault. And you didn't explicitly say I was not at fault either. The dean frowned. Dr. Shaw, the hospital has already shown its sincerity. A few months' salary and a position that should have been open to competition don't count as sincerity. I pushed the agreement back. My reputation isn't something that can be bought off with a closed-door retroactive bonus. Things have dragged on until now, and everyone is exhausted. You also need to consider whether you can still work at the hospital in the future. It's precisely because I've considered that I'm demanding a public conclusion. Are you forcing the hospital to admit management failure? The hospital does have management failures. The room fell silent again. I took out several emails from the file folder. The first one was sent to me by Director Chen 2 hours after the incident. Regardless of the facts, it is recommended that the involved doctor first express an apology to avoid escalating the family's emotions. The second letter was from the Medical Affairs Department, requesting that I suspend public statements. The third letter was an internal discussion in the department management group about handling public opinion. Push the individual out, after the heat dies down, resolve it internally. The dean's face darkened completely. What do you plan to do with these? Submit them to the independent investigation team. This is an internal hospital document and also evidence of how the hospital handles risks to medical staff. Director Chen grew anxious. Don't let personal emotions affect the entire hospital. I looked at him. When you made me apologize, it was for the hospital. When you suspended me, it was for the hospital. When you demanded confidentiality, it was still for the hospital. But what exactly is the hospital? Is it a sign hanging on the rooftop, or every real person working inside it? No one answered. I stood up. I will not accept this agreement. I have only 3 demands. First, release the complete timeline publicly. Second, revoke the suspension decision against me and clearly state that there was no medical negligence. Third, involve those who misled public opinion, concealed risks, and deleted records. The hospital director asked in a low voice, "What if the hospital refuses?" Then let the regulatory authorities and the court decide. That afternoon, I submitted materials to the health authorities, not just for myself, but also records of the hospital's long-standing practice of overloading staff with shifts. On the day of the surgery, I started work at 7:30 a.m. Entered the operating room at 8:15 a.m. And never had a full meal in between. After the surgery, I only bought a drink, yet I was pushed in front of the public because doctors are not allowed to appear relaxed. When the investigation team questioned other doctors, more and more people stepped forward. Dr. Lin Lon said, "We are not machines. Drinking water after a 10-hour surgery should not be something we need to justify." Nurse Tang submitted records of nurses' consecutive night shifts. 2 young doctors provided proof of fainting from overwork. What was initially intended to be a storm led by my personal apology gradually turned into a review of the hospital's management system. Meanwhile, Mrs. Shaw Yawen deleted some of the videos, thinking that removing them would absolve him of responsibility, but I had already completed all the evidence preservation. Worse still, after the fundraising platform froze his account, demanding proof of medical expenses, he couldn't explain the hundreds of thousands in permission fees and personal online loan expenditures. He started contacting me. The first text message, "Dr. Shaw, we're both here for the patients. There's no need to take things to the extreme." The second, "I can delete the videos, but you must drop the lawsuit." The third, "If you don't withdraw, I'll expose more inside information about the hospital." I forwarded all the text messages to Attorney Wang. He replied, "Don't respond." That evening, the police contacted Mrs. Shaw Yawen to cooperate in the investigation of the whereabouts of the raised funds. He packed his bags overnight, ready to leave the city with his child, but as soon as he arrived at the high-speed rail station, he received an electronic court notice. The defamation lawsuit had been officially filed. At the same time, the hospital's independent investigation team notified him, "Please submit the original devices used to take the photos and videos by the next morning." Mrs. Shaw Yawen stood in the waiting hall, his face pale. He had finally realized that deleting accounts, changing cities, and tearfully claiming he was only worried about his family could not make the evidence he had left behind disappear. I sat in Attorney Wang's office, reviewing the first timeline that was about to be made public. On the screen, There were only 3 simplest points in time. At 1842, the surgery ended. At 1858, the patient entered the ICU. At 1911, I bought lemonade. Fabricated by a single photo is about to be completely shattered by 3 timestamps. The hospital's press conference was scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. The audience was packed with journalists, including several self-media figures who had once pointed at my photo in their short videos and harshly criticized me, now seated in the last row. I did not take a seat on the podium. This was a clarification the hospital needed to make, not an opportunity for me to personally beg for public understanding. The head of the investigation team first announced the conclusion. After verification, Dr. Shaw did not leave his post during the surgery. 3 records appeared on the large screen. The first was the operating room system log. I entered the operating room at 8:15, and the surgery ended at 18:42, a total of 10 hours and 27 minutes, with no card swiping records indicating leaving the surgical area in between. The second was the patient transfer record. Mr. Joe entered the cardiac surgery intensive care unit at 18:58, and the bedside handover was completed at 19:05. The third segment shows convenience store surveillance footage. I walk with visibly tired steps to the freezer, grab a cup of lemonade, and pay at 19 hours 11 minutes and 17 seconds. The host paused for a few seconds. When the patient's family member took the photo, the surgery had already ended 29 minutes ago, and the patient had been taken over by the dedicated critical care team. Only the sound of camera shutters remains in the press room. Next come the anesthesia records and surgical staff verification. Dr. Lin Lan's voice is heard from the recording. Dr. Shaw completed a 10-hour high-difficulty surgery. Purchasing a beverage afterward is a normal rest activity and does not conflict with the patient's treatment. The investigation team also disclosed the records of the change of the attending physician and the risk handover. After publicly expressing distrust, the patient's family members proactively requested a change of the attending physician. Dr. Shaw completed the written handover in accordance with procedures, and there was no unauthorized termination of treatment. After the patient's condition deteriorated during transfer to another hospital, Dr. Shaw participated in emergency rescue in accordance with the law, and there was no refusal to provide treatment. I sat in the audience, my fingers gently clenched. In my previous life, I had imagined this day countless times, imagining the hospital publicly saying I was not wrong. But they never said it until I died. Now that this sentence finally came through the microphone, I was not as excited as I had imagined. I just felt calm. The heavy stone that had been pressing on my chest for a long time was being lifted little by little. At the end of the press conference, the police allowed the hospital to play a desensitized original video. It was the footage before Mrs. Shaw Yawan took the photo. He held up his phone and said to the person next to him, "Isn't it particularly ironic that he's getting a drink now?" Someone nearby reminded him, "The surgery is over, right?" Mrs. Shaw Yawan replied, "The audience doesn't know that. Just saying the patient is still in the ICU is enough." This kind of content is the easiest to go viral. The scene erupted in an uproar. In the video, Dr. Chen Yu passed by from a distance, and Mrs. Shaw Yawan caught up to ask, "If I post this, will the hospital cause trouble for me?" Dr. Chen Yu didn't tell him to delete it, only said, "You can express what you've witnessed firsthand, but be careful with your wording." Mrs. Shaw Yawan smiled, "Don't worry, I'll make it sound like the facts." After the full video finished playing, several self-media creators in the last row lowered their heads at the same time. The online sentiment completely reversed within 10 minutes, so the doctor had already finished the surgery. What's wrong with drinking a glass of water after working 10 hours straight? The family knew the truth but deliberately misled everyone. How terrifying. Shouldn't those who insulted doctors before apologize now? A flood of comments poured into my homepage. Some apologized, others said they were also misled by the narrative, and some explained they were just too angry at the time. I didn't reply. Not everyone who didn't know the truth can be let off so easily. In the afternoon, Mr. Joe finally regained consciousness. He still had a tracheal tube inserted and couldn't speak, so Nurse Tang brought him a writing board. The first sentence he wrote was, "Where is the surgeon?" Nurse Tang told him, "Dr. Shaw performed the first surgery." Later, the family requested a change of doctors, and danger arose during the transfer to another hospital. After hearing this, Mr. Joe's hands kept trembling. He asked the nurse to contact me. When I walked into the ward, he had already had the endotracheal tube removed and could only speak in a very soft voice, "Dr. Shaw, I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize for others." He closed his eyes for a moment. "Is my son saying things about you online?" I didn't hide it. They said they borrowed a lot of money from relatives to pay for my treatment. I looked at him. There really is fundraising online. Mr. Joe's face changed. "I have medical insurance, and I also have 200,000 in savings. I already handed the bank card for the surgery money to Mr. Joe Tao." He took a few breaths. "Mrs. Shaw Yawen isn't doing this for the first time. Last year, he filmed a video claiming his child was sick when in fact the child just had a common cold. Later, he even used my ID to apply for a loan." I was silent for a few seconds. "You can explain these circumstances to the police." He nodded with difficulty. "I want to report this to the police." When Mr. Joe Tao learned that his father intended to call the police, he rushed into the hospital room. "Who has been stirring things up for you?" "Mrs. Shaw Yawen raised all that money to save you." Mr. Joe raised his hand and swept the water glass from the bedside table to the floor. "Over 800,000. How much did the hospital actually receive?" Mr. Joe Tao remained silent. "Where is my bank card? How much did the medical expenses cost? Show me the transaction records." Mrs. Shaw Yawen stood at the door, crying, "I've been taking care of you in the hospital every day. Even if I don't get credit, I deserve some recognition. The emotional videos need money. Without commotion, how can we raise funds?" Mr. Joe stared at him. "So you used my life to buy traffic for your account?" He cried even harder. "I did it for this family. For this family, you slandered the doctor who saved me. He hadn't drunk that beverage, I wouldn't have had anything to film." As soon as those words left his mouth, everyone in the hospital room was stunned. Mr. Joe closed his eyes. After a long silence, he said, "Get out." Mr. Joe Tao wanted to persuade, but Mr. Joe said, "Everyone out." His voice was weak, but left no room for argument. After Mr. Joe Tao and Mrs. Shaw Yawen left, Mr. Joe looked at me. "Dr. Shaw, I will tell the police everything I know." I nodded. "Take good care of yourself. Can you still be in charge of my treatment?" I paused. "I can't." His eyes dimmed. "Because the therapeutic relationship has already changed. The hospital will assign a new qualified team." He nodded slowly. "You saved me twice, yet I have no right to ask you to bear a third time." As I walked out of the hospital room, sunlight streamed in from the end of the corridor. A news alert popped up on my phone. "Medical dispute blogger suspected of fraudulent fundraising. Police have launched an investigation." I turned off the screen. Mrs. Shaw Yawen had tried to destroy my career with a single photo, but in the end, that very photo became the first crack that reopened all his lies. The court mediation was scheduled for a month later. Mrs. Shaw Yawan looked much thinner than he did in the live stream. His account had been permanently banned, his fundraising accounts frozen, and all brand collaborations cancelled. He entered the room wearing a mask and a hat, afraid of being recognized. Mr. Zhou Tao followed behind him, looking haggard. The mediator outlined both parties' demands. My demands were very clear: a public apology, removal of the infringing content, compensation for economic losses and emotional distress caused by the defamation, and coverage of legal fees and evidence preservation costs. Mrs. Shaw Yawen's lawyer stated that he was willing to apologize but hoped not to disclose his real name publicly, and he also disagreed with the amount of compensation. My client was in a state of extreme anxiety at the time. His father-in-law was undergoing a high-risk surgery with life hanging in the balance, and when he saw the lead surgeon holding a beverage, he misunderstood the situation, which is understandable. Attorney Wang opened the evidence catalog. After the misunderstanding occurred, did the hospital and Dr. Shaw explain to him that the surgery had already ended? They did explain. Did he still continue to post content such as "left in the middle of surgery"? The opposing lawyer remained silent. Did he purchase promotion? That was for fundraising. Was all the fundraising used for medical expenses? Relevant matters are under investigation, unrelated to this case. I lifted my head. It does matter. He didn't post that photo out of anxiety. He already knew the surgery was over before taking it, and he knew how to exploit the information gap to create conflict. After receiving an explanation, he didn't delete it. Instead, he continued live streaming, fundraising, and buying engagement. This wasn't a misunderstanding, but a month-long infringement with clear profit motives. Mrs. Shaw Yawan suddenly burst into tears. I've already lost everything. What more do you want from me? He pulled off his mask, his eyes red and swollen. My account is gone, my job is gone, my child gets pointed at in school, my father-in-law refuses to see me, my husband argues with me every day. Dr. Shaw, you've already had your reputation restored, so why can't you just let me go? I looked at him. Having my reputation restored doesn't mean you never hurt me. But you didn't actually lose your job, because I saved the evidence in time. What if I hadn't continued? What if the convenience store surveillance was overwritten? What if the handover records were lost? What if the patient's rescue failed? What if the hospital ultimately chose to make me the scapegoat? Would you have stepped forward and said you knew the surgery was already over? Mrs. Shaw Yawan avoided my gaze. The answer was clear: he wouldn't. He would only keep saying that I was the one who caused the patient's death. Mr. Zhou Tao suddenly stood up. Dr. Shaw, I apologize to you on his behalf. My dad is still recovering, and our family is already in such chaos. Please, for my dad's sake, drop the lawsuit. Mr. Zhou has already provided testimony to the police and has clearly stated that he respects my right to seek legal recourse. He was just influenced by people in your hospital. I looked at Mr. Zhou Tao. Even now, you still think all the outcomes were caused by others. Your father's condition worsened because the doctors scared you. You refused tests because the costs were too high. You voluntarily transferred hospitals because the hospital lacked medical ethics. Your wife spread rumors because she was worried about the patient. You misappropriated the raised funds for promotion. So what choices have you made yourselves? Mr. Zhou Tao's face flushed red. We're not doctors, we don't understand these things. Not understanding means you can ask, you can listen to advice, and you can seek a second opinion. But not understanding doesn't give you the right to spread rumors. Mrs. Shaw Yawan suddenly walked around the table and knelt before me. Everyone in the mediation room was stunned. Dr. Shaw, I beg you, I really know I was wrong. I can apologize to you, I can post a video online, just drop the lawsuit. Don't let me have a judgment on my record. He reached out to grab my clothes. I stepped back, neither helping him up nor letting him continue his act. I took the lawsuit documents from Attorney Wong and placed them in front of him. You can explain to the court. The law will decide how much your apology is worth. He looked up at me. For the first time, there was no anger in his eyes, only fear. When he finally lost the case and left the courthouse, Mr. Joe Tao chased me to the entrance. Dr. Shaw, do you have to drive people to the brink? I stopped in my tracks. When your wife posted that video, did she ever think about whether she would drive me to the brink? She put my name, workplace, and photo online. My mother received abusive calls. My address was made public, and I got death threats. Back then, you called it public oversight. Now that I'm suing according to the law, you call it going for the kill. I turned around. What you've never been used to is fairness. It's that others can only endure, never fight back. A few days later, Mr. Joe instructed a lawyer to handle the property changes. He withdrew the bank card he had entrusted to his son and revoked all proxy authorizations. The old house under his name, originally intended for his son, was now put up for sale to fund his own rehabilitation and retirement. When Mr. Joe Tao found out, he knelt outside the hospital room all night. Mr. Joe did not see him, he only had a nurse relay one message: when I was sick, you handed my life over to online traffic. Now that I'm old, I dare not entrust my retirement to you. Meanwhile, the platform announced the outcome. Mrs. Shaw Yaowen's account has been permanently banned, and the issues involving fraudulent fundraising and misappropriation of funds have been handed over to relevant authorities for investigation. Everything he had built through tears and emotions quickly collapsed in the face of evidence. But the incident is not over yet. Just as the hospital announced its preliminary disciplinary action against Dr. Chen Yu, he sent anonymous materials to several media outlets, accusing me of exploiting patient privacy to manipulate public opinion and undermine competing colleagues. He tried to turn his last counterattack into a whistleblowing report by an internal doctor. But he didn't know, the anonymous email account he used to send the emails had once been linked to his backup phone number. It took investigators less than a day to track him down. At the health authorities' hearing, Dr. Chen Yu sat across from me. He looked even more haggard than during the last session. He persisted in his accusation. Dr. Shaw provided patient medical information to the media through a lawyer, suspected of violating patient privacy. The investigator asked, "What evidence do you have?" The surgery time, patient complications, and treatment process were all made public online. Attorney Wong submitted the hospital's approval records for the published materials. All public content was desensitized uniformly by the hospital's investigation team before release, containing no identifying information such as patient names, ID numbers, or medical record numbers. Dr. Shaw himself did not provide any unauthorized medical records to the media. Dr. Chen Yu gritted his teeth, but he provided the medical records to the lawyer. The lawyer accepted the client's commission, collected evidence related to the infringement for the lawsuit, and signed a confidentiality agreement. He also made our chat records public. What was made public was content already displayed by the patient's family in their live broadcast, and it was preserved by the platform in accordance with the law. The investigator looked at Dr. Chen Yu. On the contrary, we need you to explain, why did you disclose internal scheduling, job competition, and doctors' handling of information to the patient's family? Dr. Chen Yu's face turned pale. I didn't disclose the patient's privacy. What you disclosed was the hospital's internal management information, and you deleted the consultation records during the investigation. I was just revising the wording. The information system logs show that you deleted the urgent examination recommendation from the original treatment team after the patient's condition deteriorated. He suddenly looked at me. It was Dr. Shah who fell again. The back-end records weren't written by me. The investigation team released another recording. It was a phone call between Dr. Chen Yu and Mrs. Shah Yawan after he took over the patient. Mrs. Shah Yawan, if the examination really finds a problem, does that mean Dr. Shah's first surgery wasn't done well? Dr. Chen Yu, that's one way to put it. As long as the follow-up treatment is handled by me, the public will naturally compare who is more responsible. Mrs. Shah Yawan laughing, then I'll keep talking about him. Don't forget to help us reduce the fees later. Dr. Chen Yu, without refusing, first, build up public opinion, then the hospital will take it seriously. The recording ended, and the hearing room fell into complete silence. Dr. Chen Yu's face gradually lost its color. This recording was obtained illegally. The investigator replied, the recording was provided by Mrs. Shah Yawan himself. He stated that you suggested he expand public opinion to seek fee reductions. Dr. Chen Yu abruptly stood up. He's lying, he'll say anything to lessen his own responsibility. Chat logs and recordings corroborate each other. He is the one spreading rumors. No one denies his responsibility, the investigator said calmly. What we are discussing now is your responsibility chain. Dr. Chen Yu sat back down, his shoulders trembling slightly. Just before the hearing ended, he suddenly looked at me. Dr. Shah, are you satisfied now? Ever since I entered the hospital, I've worked harder than you in every way. Why do you always get the important surgeries? Why does the director of the aortic center always prioritize you? Just because you suck up to the director and pretend to fight for your life in the operating room? I looked at him. I didn't decide the surgery assignment, nor did I decide the investigation results. Stop playing innocent. He completely lost control of his emotions. If you hadn't kept pushing, this would have been over long ago. I nodded. If I kept apologizing, kept silent, kept taking all the blame, then yes, it would have been over quickly. You could have gotten my medical records and results, the hospital could have saved its reputation, the patient's family could have gotten compensation and attention, only I would lose my job, my reputation, and possibly even my life. Dr. Chen Yu's lips trembled. Do you have to go for the kill? I never asked the hospital to impose any disciplinary action on you, I only submitted the facts. I stood up. It wasn't me who ruined you, it was your belief that a patient's life, a colleague's reputation, and public outrage could all be traded for a position that ruined you. The final outcome was announced a week later. Dr. Chen Yu was removed from his administrative post, suspended from performing surgeries for 1 year, and subjected to further professional competency and ethical reviews. His actions of altering medical records and leaking internal information to family were recorded in the hospital's integrity file. Director Chen was removed from his position as head of the publicity department for pushing the doctor to apologize and issuing misleading statements before the facts were fully investigated. The medical affairs department was instructed to improve the protection mechanism for medical personnel in major public opinion incidents. The hospital publicly revoked the suspension measures against me and restored all my medical practice privileges. At a hospital-wide staff meeting, the president personally read out the disciplinary decision. Dr. Shah did not commit any medical error in this incident, nor did he refuse to provide treatment. The hospital's previous statement was not sufficiently accurate and caused negative impact. Dr. Shah, the hospital expresses its apology for this. Some looked at me, others breathed a sigh of relief. The dean announced, after deliberation, it has been decided to appoint Dr. Shah as the head of the Aortic Disease Center. The applause grew louder. Director Su, seated in the front row, nodded at me. After the meeting, the dean personally handed me the appointment document. "You deserve this." I took the documents and glanced at them for a few seconds, then pulled the resignation letter from my own folder. The smile on the dean's face vanished. "You want to resign? The disciplinary action has been revoked, and those responsible have been dealt with. What else are you dissatisfied with?" "It's not dissatisfaction." I placed the resignation letter on the table. "It's that I no longer believe this hospital will prioritize the truth in the next similar incident. The system can be changed. I believe it will change." "Then why do you still want to leave?" "Because changing the system comes at a cost, and this time, that cost shouldn't continue to be borne by me." Director Sue chased after me. "Think it over. The aortic center has been your goal for so many years. What I want to do is surgery, not a title in this office. Outside may not necessarily be better than here. At least choosing to leave is my own decision." He was silent for a long time. "Where are you planning to go?" "South City Medical Center, a newly established public specialties center. Months ago, they extended a talent recruitment invitation to me. I turned it down to stay at my familiar hospital. Until the day the hospital asked me to sign a confidentiality agreement, I accepted the interview." "What did they promise you?" "They didn't promise the highest position. They only agreed to 3 things: establish a joint decision-making system for complex medical records, ensure mandatory rest after lengthy surgeries, and in the event of doctor-patient disputes, refrain from unilaterally disciplining doctors based on public opinion until the fact-finding is complete." "That's enough." Before leaving the office, the director asked me, "Are you really not regretting this?" I took off my old badge and placed it on the table. "What I regret most is that I used to mistake endurance for responsibility. Not anymore." On the day I completed the resignation procedures, the weather was beautiful. I packed the last stack of professional books from my office into a cardboard box. At the very back of the drawer was a convenience store receipt, 7:11 p.m. Lemonade, 4 yuan. After the incident, the convenience store clerk reprinted the original receipt for me as evidence of the time. It once proved that I hadn't left my post during the surgery, but now it's no longer needed. Yet I didn't throw it away, not to remember the grievance, but to remember how easily a person can be pushed into the abyss, and to remind myself that innocence cannot be kept only in the heart, it must be recorded, protected, and spoken out. Nurse Tang helped me move the cardboard boxes. Her eyes reddened as she said, "Director Shaw, I really hate to see you go. Don't call me director anymore. You'll always be a director wherever you go." She asked again, "What do we do if we encounter something like this again?" I handed her a book. "First, preserve the evidence. Don't bear it alone, and don't believe that as long as you're kind enough, everyone will be reasonable." Dr. Lin Lan was waiting for me downstairs. She handed me a glass of lemonade. "You can drink this without worry this time." I smiled. "Too much sugar." "Why weren't you complaining about too much sugar after finishing a 10-hour surgery?" "I was too tired back then." We walked out of the hospital gate. No farewell party, no sentimental banners. A few young doctors stood by the steps, waving at me. I saw the bulletin board that once held my disciplinary notice, now replaced with new policy documents, regulations on mandatory rest for medical staff after high-intensity surgeries, interim measures for the protection of medical personnel's rights and interests in major online public opinion incidents, standard procedures for the replacement of medical teams and risk handover. These regulations come too late, but at least in the future, some people will suffer less harm because of them. A month later, the court issued its ruling. The online content posted by Mrs. Shaw Yaowen and Mr. Zhou Tao constituted defamation of reputation. The two individuals must issue a public apology on the platform associated with their original accounts and on mainstream media, lasting no less than 10 days. They are jointly liable for compensation of economic losses, moral damages, and reasonable expenses incurred in defending rights. The judgment explicitly stated, the right to free expression online does not equate to the right to fabricate facts, mislead the public, and infringe on others' professional reputation. Mrs. Shaw Yaowen initially refused to comply, and the court took enforcement measures in accordance with the law. When he finally released his apology video, there was no filter or background music. He read the judgment verbatim. I knowingly posted misleading content despite being aware that Dr. Shaw had already completed the surgery and handed over the patient, causing public misunderstanding. His voice choked up halfway through. No one in the comments was offering comfort. Some asked, "How much in donations did you collect from this incident back then? Why were the permission fees higher than the medical costs? The doctor who actually saved lives was the one you cyberbullied. What are you crying about now?" The fundraising case is still under further investigation. He returned most of the donations that were not used for medical purposes, and the parts involving personal consumption and false statements are being handled by relevant authorities according to the law. His media career has completely ended. Mr. Zhou Tao lost his father's financial support. He and Mrs. Shaw Yaowen kept arguing over debt, lawsuits, and blaming each other, eventually leading to their separation. After recovering, Mr. Zhou moved into a recent retirement community. He sold his old house and divided the money into a medical account and a retirement account, no longer entrusting it to his son for management. Before leaving the hospital, he sent me a letter with only a few lines. "Dr. Shaw, thank you for saving me, and thank you for not continuing to sacrifice yourself because of my son's mistakes. Only when one grows old does one realize, a child's wrongdoing does not mean others must forgive." I placed the letter in the bookcase and did not go to see him. Some relationships require neither hatred nor continuation, each bearing their own life is the most fitting conclusion. The work at South City Medical Center was busier than I had anticipated. The new team had just been established, and the equipment, procedures, and personnel all needed to be integrated. I no longer scheduled 2 high-difficulty surgeries consecutively. After each operation, the team members had to take turns resting. Communication with family members was handled by 2 medical staff members together, with full documentation throughout. Anyone requesting a change of attending physician had to sign a formal confirmation. Some say I am too cautious. I don't mind. Caution is not indifference, and boundaries are not an abdication of responsibility. True, steady kindness should never be built on someone's endless sacrifice. 2 years later, we completed the 100th complex aortic surgery at the center. At the celebration, the young Dr. Su stood hesitantly at the door with a glass of water. He had just completed a 9-hour surgery and looked pale. "Director Shaw, the patient is still in the ICU." "I know. Can I take a 10-minute break?" "Why not?" "The family members are all outside. I'm afraid they'll see me drinking water and think I don't care about the patient." The meeting room suddenly fell silent. Everyone knew about that experience of mine. I walked over to the fridge, took out a glass of lemonade, inserted a straw, and handed it to him. "Has the patient handover been completed?" "It's done." "Is the critical care team on duty?" "Yes." "Has the risk explanation been given?" "I did." "Then drink." He took the cup, his eyes slightly red. I looked at him and said word by word, "A doctor can be tired, can drink water, can eat, and can also protect himself from being slandered." We save lives, but we don't need to destroy ourselves to prove we are worthy of this profession. The sunlight outside the window was bright. Sitting in the conference room, I finally finished that glass of lemonade, which had been delayed for many years. Its taste was a little sour.